Oh no, I went and pulled up the behind the scenes audio mixer. Well, we're live uh here in the off season, streaming to still getting millions of viewers as always. No, but we're here to talk a little bit about free agency. As always, welcome in to Load the Box, the new and improved Load the Box with a fancy new logo, with a Viking ship and a flag and official looking fonts and stuff. So still changing it everywhere, but it's now down in the bottom left of the screen, so that's pretty fun. I'm Jordan Hawthorne. I am your co-host, being joined as always by the wonderful and the marvelous Jack H. Day. Jack, free agency has begun. I think we've all been getting notifications on our phones about big names leaving teams, guys staying on teams. What has been the biggest surprise for you from any team's free agency so far that you've seen? And then also, how have you been since we last did a show?
I've been good, and I think so. Free agency, I believe, actually starts next week, but the releasing period, I'm hoping they can still hear me because I know we had some issues with that
You're
last
good.
week.
You're
But
good. I got it.
perfect. Free agency starts on March 17th, if I'm remembering that date correctly off my head. But also, that's the date where teams need to be underneath the cap. And we know that the Vikings obviously needed to get underneath the cap. They were over, and nothing like the Saints, obviously. But biggest surprise, that's a good question. I think I was a little bit surprised when the Riley Reef news broke today. I wasn't fully expecting that to happen because I just feel like the Vikings needed to find more depth at other areas as well. And now it's pretty clear that offensive line is going to have to get addressed, and maybe free agency and the draft both. Whether that be the tackle position, if that means Ezra Cleveland slides to left tackle, that means you have two guard spots. I saw someone tweeted it out, and I'm forgetting about the name, but they was the Vikings offensive line as it sits right now is Ezra Cleveland, Kyle Hinton, Garrett Bradbury, Drew Samia, and Brian O'Neill. And I was texting a buddy about that, friend of the show, Billy Biskuski, if he's listening. And I said, can you imagine? I honestly think Aaron Donald would get triple teamed by the interior of that offensive line and would have absolutely no problem at getting at Kirk Cousins in like 2.5 seconds. So that there's clearly some issues along that offensive line. The Vikings offensive line, man, they needed the money, and I'm excited to see what Ezra Cleveland can do. You drafted Ezra Cleveland as your left tackle of the future. You didn't draft him to play right guard. So I'm excited to see what he can do at left tackle, but it still does leave a couple more holes on this Vikings roster now.
Yeah, and honestly, a guy like Hinton out of a small school, I'm hesitant to give hype to him because I was very much on the Drew Samia train, and he was very bad at protecting Kirk Cousins and doing anything competently, to be honest. So he has a bright future as a backup ahead of him, I think. But Hinton's a guy that's just completely unproven. As much as we want to be excited, as much as he dominated, 200-pound defensive tackles at, ITT Tech, the level of competition when you're playing interior offensive line in the NFL, just especially coming from like a D2 school or whatever it was, on FBS school, whatever it was, it's too much of a jump for us to trust him right away. So I'm wondering, I mean, Ezra Cleveland might not even be the left tackle. I've seen many a mock draft where the Vikings go with the kid out of, I think it's Virginia Tech. There's a lot of good tackles. None of the names are coming to me right now because I haven't done a mock draft since we did one a couple of weeks ago. But there's just so many. This is a good tackle class, and I think the Vikings could find themselves in a spot where they get a guy like I think his name's Rashawn Slater, who's sitting right there, middle of the first round. You take him; he's the left tackle of the future. Brian O'Neill's solid at the tackle, and then you can keep Cleveland inside, or you can go after a free agent with some of this money that you're freeing up, and you can get a guy like Zeitler, who was released today by the Giants. You can get a guy like who is it, Thuney from the Patriots, who I know a lot of Vikings fans had a lot of hype around. So it's going to be interesting. This is the very beginning stages of free agency. We know who's been franchise tagged. We've seen some deals get signed, but there's still a lot of stuff to do. This is the biggest thing that I want to point out. Jack, who's going to catch the Vikings tight end screens now that the slowest tight end in the NFL is gone? What are we going to do without Kyle Rudolph on this offense? And that's a shot that I shouldn't be taking because I love Kyle Rudolph, and I'll talk about it later. But what are we going to do now at the tight end position?
Yeah, and the Kyle Rudolph situation was a weird one because I think it's fair to say that the majority of the fan base knew that was coming. I think it was just time to part ways. And I can't imagine being in that room when that decision was finally made, because the things that Kyle Rudolph has done for not only the Minnesota Vikings organization over the last 10 years, but the entire state and the community within the state of Minnesota. I retweeted something that it surfaced a couple years ago where they did a story on someone within the children's hospital that he has done wonders with, like I said, during his time 10-year stint in Minnesota. And it's emotional watching it, just seeing the impact that a guy like that can make. Like I said, not only as a captain of the Vikings football team for so many years, not and I mean that was one of the many reasons why the guy was nominated for Walter Payton Man of the Year. You really can't find a more classy guy than Kai Rudolph. Not only was he classy that way, he was like very well respected by the media, I know as well. When I was working with the Vikings, I always seemed like he was one of the last people, not at the podium, but around his locker getting interviewed. He'd answer every question until he was told to stop, essentially. So it was a bummer, but at the same time, I'm excited to see what Tyler Conklin and Irv Smith Jr. can do in this offense. We saw them kind of start to emerge as a duo towards the end of last season when Tyler Conklin started getting some more time. I also saw an idea that I absolutely would be fond of. I know there's a lot of people that are like, why the hell would we waste a first round pick on a tight end? But give me a 12 personnel set with Kyle Pitts and Irv Smith Jr. on the same field and tell me how in the hell someone's going to stop that offense. I saw a mock draft that actually had the Vikings trading up to 10 to select Kyle Pitts because he started to fall. And I've seen numerous people, several reports saying Kyle Pitts is the best pound for pound player in this entire draft class. Take away the meaningful quarterback position, straight up player wise, Kyle Pitts could end up being, I think someone, I don't remember who it was, but someone was talking about who do you feel the most comfortable saying is going to have a Hall of Fame career? And they picked Kyle Pitts. And I remember watching a lot of his games at Florida when we were doing some DraftKings stuff. And I was just like, who in the hell is this guy? And he is going to be hard to handle at the next level. So I wouldn't be shocked if that happened. I'd be shocked if he fell to 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I don't think the Vikings are going to be trading up personally for a tight end in the first round, especially after the lack of depth now, not only on the offensive line, but the defensive line as well. So the last cut for now, I don't know how Shamar Stephen is still on the roster, but he is to this point. The last one that we can talk about is Minnesota Vikings' favorite position to talk about, the kicker position that now belongs to Greg Joseph due to the cutting or the release of everyone's favorite Dan Bailey. Jordan, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Dan Bailey, the Vikings. I was thinking about this in my car this morning because we decided we were going to do a show tonight, and we're kind of just playing it by ear with the off season. So we decided we're going to do a show, and I start thinking like, well, what are kind of my thoughts on everything, so that I can, not practice them, but just kind of know, I don't want to be surprised by anything. So I'm thinking about it, and I think I have 50, maybe 60 if I'm lucky years left of living on this earth. And I was like, I legitimately don't know if the Vikings will ever figure the kicking position out in that time. Thought we had it with Blair Walsh, and then he shanks it against Seattle, and he's never the same. And then now he's not even playing in the league. And then I thought we had it with what's his name? Kai Fobath. That's what it is. With Kai Fobath. And then he started missing PATs, but then he was money from like 55 against the Saints before the miracle happened. So I don't understand why we let him go just because he shanked a couple PATs. Like, he clearly did it when it mattered, so I wanted to keep him. So he's gone now. I think he's in Washington or New England. We get Daniel Carlson in, and we cut him, and now he's looking good. It seems like we have such bad luck at the position. Dan Bailey comes in, and I think he was the second all-time most accurate kicker. Second only to maybe the greatest kicker ever in Justin Tucker, who, is going to hold that accuracy record forever, some may think. And now it feels like it's either going to be a Band-Aid for another season or two, or we're going to draft a guy in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, like late in the draft. We'll bring in a kicker and hope that he's good. And we just kind of have to cross our fingers and hope that we got the guy. And I think if we do end up drafting a kicker, you will not see them get cut a month into the season like we did with Daniel Carlson. I think they'll hang on to him a little bit longer and kind of let him figure this stuff out. So I don't letting Bailey go. I understand. I wanted to cut him after that. I think it was the Jacksonville game where he missed like 5 kicks and we ended up having to win the game in overtime. Like I was ready to let Dan Bailey go. I don't think any Vikings were attached to him. He doesn't have any memorable moments. It was pretty cut and dry. Just kind of get rid of him. I want to speak on Kyle Rudolph for just 1 second, because my feelings of Kyle Rudolph are kind of summed up with his statement that he wrote in the Players Tribune about how his time as a Minnesota Viking has come to an end, but his time as a Minnesotan, like just a member of the community, is just getting started. I think this is a guy that really loves the state and the community that he's in. He does a ton for the community, like you pointed out. Walter Payton Man of the Year. Unfortunately, for about 2 or 3 months, the NFL kind of gets ugly with free agency and having to cut guys to save money and the cap and everything. It gets kind of brutal, and the business side shows itself a little bit, and nobody ever likes that. But I think Rudolph is one of those guys. I think he will sign a 1-day contract before he retires to retire as a Viking. I think everybody's going to remember a lot of stuff about him, especially, that the touchdown in a couple years ago against the Saints in the playoffs, in overtime. That's a big one. He has a lot of memorable plays that he's made for us. He's been a really good player for us, and I hate to see him go. And I hope he goes to New England because I think they could use him, and I think he would have a good little career with Sergeant's Tale. But I'll let you talk about Dan Bailey and what your thoughts are on that. And then I also want to talk about one more thing. Danielle Hunter is Stefan Diggsing his way right out of town, isn't he? Like, he's liking tweets about getting traded to the Titans and, making me make Twitter memes about how, it's going to be like 5 first-round picks to get him out of this team. What's going on there? So tell me about what you think about Dan Bailey leaving. Who's the replacement going to be? And then just let's cry about Danielle Hunter for about 10 minutes.
Yeah, so Dan Bailey, there's not a whole lot to say about it, I think, going into the Tampa Bay game, as well as another one that comes to mind. I think he was phasing his way off this roster during the season last year, kind of how you sum that up, and I agree with you. And just to top everything off and put that talk in the rearview mirror, and not in the rearview mirror, because kicking talk will be brought up again several times between now and the start of the regular season. And that was kind of the last note I wanted to make, is be prepared for one of the main stories surrounding training camp this summer to be some sort of kicking battle to some extent. It always seems to happen. You just listed, I don't even know how many kickers you just listed within the last 5-10 years that have played on this team. And that was without even bringing up the Kyer Vedvik
Oh my God.
situation where they traded a 5th-round pick for a kicker that never even saw the field. So I'm bought into the narrative that position is cursed, and I won't believe otherwise. Truthfully, I don't think any Vikings fan will believe otherwise until the day they get to see their team win a Super Bowl, because there's always going to be that sense. If there's a meaningful kick in the playoffs, it's like, there's no way this splits the uprights. So
Yep.
Kicking talk, it's not that fun, but it's something you have to, you bring with you when you start a Minnesota Vikings podcast. You have to talk about kickers because that's what we do up here in Minnesota. And you had to bring up Danielle Hunter too. And I've had this conversation with a couple people already, but I think at the end of the day, the only way you're trading Danielle Hunter, you are getting a massive haul. And when I say massive haul, you are getting a hell of a lot more than what you got for Stefan Diggs. And I think they still got a 1st, 4th, and 5th round pick for Stefan Diggs. You are in the driver's seat. You have him under contract. Yes, he liked a couple tweets, and I will say this. When I saw some stuff circulating, I don't remember what the article was, but I quoted Stefan Diggs in an article within the last 2 weeks saying there might actually be truth to all rumors. And that's what I said. And if that's the case, it's not looking good for Danielle Hunter and the Minnesota Vikings, but I think the Vikings still hold the leverage. I'm not sitting here saying that Danielle Hunter doesn't deserve a contract extension. Worries me slightly coming off that neck injury. We haven't seen him play for over a year now. That worries me, but the Twitter stuff, social media has become such a distraction within sports. Like, there's a lot of good things that come out of social media, but the people that are figuring this stuff out and going through Danielle Hunter's likes and first off, Danielle Hunter probably shouldn't be liking tweets about the Tennessee Titans fan base talking about acquiring him via trade. But I'll end my thoughts on this. If I'm the Minnesota Vikings and he comes to me and he wants out, there's not a trade involving Danielle Hunter that I would do. I mean, sure, you can probably win me over with enough draft capital, but trading Danielle Hunter in 2021, in my opinion, means that Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson are coming to Minnesota. You are getting a quarterback because that's that defensive piece. He's a 26-year-old that's been in the league since he was 20, and he's been dominant all the way, every single season. Yes, he didn't play last year because he had the neck injury, but players like that are hard to find. I think what was it that the Bears had to give up to get Khalil Mack? Like that's the type of trade
I think it was 2
that you have to do. Yeah, and you demand that 2 1s is like the bar minimum for Danielle Hunter.
That's
in my
the
opinion.
stouting point, right? That's
yes,
the like that's what they have to offer, and then we should be. I think we should stout off at like 3 1s and an impact player. I mean, Danielle Hunter, we've seen this defense without him, right? Like, it's not good. We can't pressure the quarterback. Now, we got Stephen Weatherly back. That's kind of a low-key signing that I think could be a big addition that we look back on next season and say, oh, hey, we love having this guy back. But Weatherly isn't going to do it himself unless Danielle Hunter's on the other side, getting double teams, splitting them, and, getting 15, 16 sacks next season. So I think that you have to get the what I put on Twitter. It was half a joke, half not. By the way, hello to you as well, Amy Lamont in the chat. What I put on Twitter was, it was that Kylo Ren from the second Star Wars prequel, like saying, Mo, like 3 first-round picks from the Titans doesn't cut it for me. Because those are going to be late picks, especially if they get Danielle Hunter. Those are going to be late picks, playoff-type picks. It's going to be late in the first round. We've seen that we can succeed late in the first. You have to get a haul, man. I mean, an absolute haul to move Danielle Hunter right now. And I think it's kind of supply and demand. We need him. We desperately need a pass rusher. And we said all season, think of the free agents the Vikings are getting back in 2021. Danielle Hunter and Michael Pierce on the D-line. So you're going to have to pay out the ass to get one of them off of us. So I'll let you finish your thought. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm very passionate about it because I don't want to see him leave.
and rightfully so. I don't think, but from what I'm saying, I don't either. I don't want to see Danielle Hunter not in purple next season. One, because I never want to have our offensive line play against that guy. And 2, I saw what our defensive line looked like without him last year, like you said, and it was a struggle watching at times. So it's kind of jokingly when I say it has to be some sort of trade that involves Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson, but that's the type of trade talks that this would be like a blockbuster trade. I think some of these fan bases don't really realize. They see the stats and they're like, oh yeah, like this guy he's good at football, as one would say. But I kind of just lost my train of thought. Sorry, by the way, if my mic started freaking out. It sounded like it just started to rain really heavily. We were in like a tornado warning like a half hour ago. So we went from, it was like 60 degrees for the first time up here yesterday. And now it was like a tornado warning.
It was like 75 today for us. And then it's supposed to rain really, really hard tomorrow. But
it's snowing in northern Minnesota, and we had tornado warnings here. So
I think that a trade for Danielle, honestly, because if the Texans are going to give us Watson, why not call San Francisco and get Cousins to them, get Danielle to the Texans, get Garoppolo to the Texans, throw some first-round picks, just this kind of throw all that stuff in there and negotiate it out. But we want Watson. We don't care what happens to Cousins and Hunter. I would prefer Hunter go to the Texans more than the Ninos. The Ninos get, Cousins, and then the Texans get Jimmy G, and it's kind of, and then I'm sure there's going to be draft picks swapped around. Rick Spielman will probably ask for every 7th round pick that those two teams have for the next 20 years. But like, I think that it's doable. But like you said, it has to be a blockbuster, monster, like franchise altering deal to get him off of us. In the same way that the Vikings traded for Herschel Walker and mortgaged the franchise and created the Cowboys dynasty for them in the 90s. So
yeah, it just started raining. It's distracting the hell out of me if you couldn't tell. But I think one of my windows might be open up here, so it sounds louder than it is too. But yeah, I'm just extremely hopeful that Mike Zimmer can figure out some sort of pass rush in 2021, because the lack of it hurts everyone on that defense. You mentioned getting some free agents back. I think Anthony Barr is going to be a bigger air quote free agent addition this year, and Eric Kendricks missed some football towards the end of last year as well. The corners are going to have another year under their belt, and that the cornerback play wasn't great last year, but it's not easy playing cornerback when your pass rushers are giving quarterbacks 10 to 15 seconds. Yes, I know I'm exaggerating, but 10 to 15 seconds in the pocket to survey the field.
Absolutely.
So I think you need to get Danielle Hunter back. And like I said, I'll just end my final thoughts on the Danielle Hunter situation. You cannot let him, and I don't think Rick Spielman is dumb enough to do this, but you can't just let a guy like that slip through the cracks. You are in the driver's seat. You demand what you think his value is worth. He's a 26-year-old with, I mean, it's hard for me to say this with 100% confidence. I'd like to say he still has his best football ahead of him. I know he's coming off that lingering neck injury, but he's 26 years old, and essentially he's built like a superhuman. He's the most jacked human I've ever seen in my entire life. He has veins that I think are bigger than my biceps. So, yeah, you can't trade him unless you're getting a absolute haul in return, and I don't think that's going to necessarily happen this year. So.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'll kind of wrap things up. The speed round, if you will. The Vikings have cut the big names anyway. Kyle Rudolph, Riley Reef, and Dan Bailey. Danielle Hunter is liking tweets about getting traded to the Titans, and I think the Raiders were the other team or something like that. The Vikings' official position is still that we are not trading Cousins, but last year about this time, our official position was that we were not trading Diggs, and you know, that's kind of what happened. So yeah, let's see. Tom Day said your dad is pretty jacked. Oh man, Tom Day, always appreciate you in the chat. Yeah. So honestly, that's kind of what's happened in free agency so far. Maybe there's a trade coming that we don't know about. Apparently, Courtney Cronin tweeted "Welp."
No, it was Josiah Anderson.
That's
so
who
it
it
was
is.
more of a national thing.
Got
I don't
it.
think it necessarily related to Minnesota.
My bad. That's a big distinction to make, because Courtney Cronin is just the Vikings.
That I'd be a little bit nervous if that were the case. But
well, never mind then. I was gonna say, like, maybe we're gonna have to have an emergency show about, you know, new quarterbacks and buying jerseys and, you know, maybe getting Deshaun Watson. Whatever happens, we'll be here to you know, kind of sum up the news on Wednesdays. Next week we're gonna start looking at defensive line prospects, kind of getting ready for the draft, which is about a month and a half away now.
50 days.
50 days.
Dot.
So yeah, about a month and 2/3 away. But we'll get.
I've been counting. I have a calendar at my desk. I've been counting almost every day instead of just keeping like a tracker like a normal person. I just count every day and see how many days it is. Which, yes, I know I'm a psychopath. Speaking of the draft, I think this is the last little bit of news that happened in Minnesota today. Good news, not releasing. Vikings have been awarded 2 comp picks. I'm just gonna say comp picks. So that I always butcher that word for some reason. Like I never like say the words in the right order that they're supposed to go. But an extra 4th and an extra 6th round pick, which I think is huge. It gives the Vikings more wiggle room if they want to move up. I still, in my personal opinion, I've been pretty vocal about this. If one of those guys that you have circled on your big board falls to 14, use that 14th round pick, 14th overall pick. If not, I'm more than comfortable with this team sliding back in the draft. They're going to have to probably address that offensive line now. I think free agency still has a week or so until it actually officially opens.
Right.
So that's going to kind of cater what the Vikings need to do after that time goes through.
Exactly. But, I think that the Vikings should use both of their comp picks on kickouts and just let them duke it out.
My favorite one, I saw several people say this. They're just going to trade them into the 7th round, so they have every 7th round pick in the 2021 NFL draft. But I still really like the idea of sliding back a little bit, and whether that means trying to slide back to acquire a 2nd round pick or using some of those picks to slide back up into the 2nd round. I think the sweet spot for the needs that the Vikings have is anywhere from the back end of the 1st round all the way through late 3rd, early 4th round. I think that's where I want the majority of their picks to go. And now they're up to 12 picks, I believe, if that's correct off the top of my head. I think last year before the Diggs trade, they were sitting around this area too. 12 picks plus 15 last year, 27 picks in back-to-back years. That's critical. And I don't think people don't necessarily realize how important that is to this team, especially for Mike Zimmer, for Rick Spielman. Say what you want about what they've done over the last 6-7 years. Both of their jobs are on the line if this season doesn't go well. So the fact that they're not, the word rebuild is what everyone likes to use, but they haven't officially like started to rebuild from the ground up, but they're also bringing in 27 kids that have a lot of upside that the Vikings were fond of in the last 2 drafts. So that excites me, getting a lot of young talent in here. You kind of needed to have that flip happen, and we're starting to see that transition made. So whether or not the Vikings have a good season in 2021, there's still going to be a lot of young talent. If that means there is a new regime that takes over, they're going to be handed the keys to a little bit of a nicer vehicle than what a 30-year-old, if the average age was a 28, 29, 30-year-old on the roster.
Yep. Similar to what Zimmer came into whenever he started in Minnesota. He had a young Harrison Smith, a young Xavier Rhodes. Like he had 2 good foundational pieces there. Not to mention, like he had Brian Roberson on the defensive side. He had Adrian Peterson too, and pretty solid thing to walk into. But yeah, that's gonna be all from us tonight, I believe. Like I said, next week I think we're gonna try and do the defensive line, because I think that's a spot that the Vikings could really go towards in the 2021 draft. Gonna be a lot of draft stuff coming out from us. Obviously, we'll still talk a little bit about free agency, depending on what splashy moves the Vikings make, which historically not many, but Jack, do you have anything else? Because I'm going to end the show tonight. I'm going to break tradition.
I do not. I am pretty much, I think I've rambled on long enough. It's been one of those weeks where it's like, there has to be some sort of news coming. So you're just kind of waiting around for it to happen. Then all of a sudden it happens. It's like, I was not expecting that to happen. It's like, yeah, you were. You literally have been waiting for this to happen all week, and now it happens. I still think Shamar Stephen is the next likely candidate to not be on this roster, and I think that would save. I don't even remember the savings. I'm not going to say a number because I don't know
Right.
off the top of my
If
head.
we could say
$15
in a Subway sandwich, I'd cut the guy. He's terrible. He's
yeah,
bad.
And I think that 3-tech position is one that needs to get addressed early, and I say early with that sweet spot I just mentioned, anywhere from the late first to the 4th round. I think you have to get that position addressed.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of positions that need to get addressed. We're going to be doing some player profiles for the next foreseeable future. Probably the rest of the show is up until draft week. We'll
just recap the draft.
Yeah, and then we'll be talking about God, we're only 50 days away, man. That's exciting stuff. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, so thank you guys for tuning in. Amy Lamont saying that she held the tornado watches in Minnesota to go with the heavy rain. Yeah, it's crazy up there in Minnesota, and it's probably moving down to Ohio because that's typically what happens. Which I'm super excited about. But it was 75 today. I really can't complain. So, yeah, that's all we got. Like Jack said, tune in. It's gonna start being a little bit more regularly scheduled again, with some draft coverage, talking about some prospects and stuff. But other than that, one more time,